This border war, fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Green keeps it himself, looking for the end zone. Isaiah Green, touchdown! Quarterback keeper for 17, and Marshall back up by 2 touchdowns.
Story toward Jackson, got separation to the 20, to the 10, and he will go. Lucky Jackson from 54 yards out. After a Western Kentucky record 16 catches a week ago, he gives the Hilltoppers the early lead today.
Pressure off the edge. Screen delivers. What a catch for Bias, who brings it in. Armani Levias to the house. Touchdown, Marshall.
And will 46 come on the field? Yes, he will. Corey Munson, the freshman, the true freshman out of Warner Robins, Georgia. As long as 48. This will be from 52 yards. From the far hash mark, John Haggerty, the punter, will hold. Jared Nash will snap it. It's definitely long enough. It is good! Unbelievable. The true freshman, Corey Munson, hammers it home from 52 yards. What a clutch kick there to win the ball game.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. The position group breakdowns for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers is continuing this week. Actually, it's going to finish up with this episode. We're going to be talking about the quarterbacks, which is the position of this offseason. There was a lot of question marks around who was going to be the guy, and just recently that announcement was made. We'll talk about that here in a little bit. Stephen is back with me. We're going to not only cover the quarterbacks this week, but we're also going to talk about the coaching staff and give you a rundown of who's who and who's coaching what and how long they've been here and all that good stuff. And then we'll get Moff's season predictions for the Toppers in 2020. So without further ado, let me welcome back in Stephen Moffitt, our resident Hilltopper expert. And let's talk quarterback. Steve, it was the hot button issue all offseason. Once we saw some departures and transfers and all that good stuff, was who was going to be the guy. And then Western got a graduate transfer from the University of Maryland, Tyrell. All right, you're going to have to help me with the last name because I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, and I'm tired of saying it wrong if I'm saying it wrong.
I've seen Pegrom. That's all I've heard is Pegrom.
Okay, Pegrom. I mean, of course, everybody's going to call him Piggy. That's what we're going to call him for the duration of the rest of his career at Western Kentucky, but I hate getting guys' names wrong, so we're going to go with Pegrom. Anyway, graduate transfer from University of Maryland, Tyrell Pegrom, the senior, 5'11", 205. I mean, I like the fact that you got somebody coming in from a Power 5 conference that's played a fair amount of ball at Maryland. We'll see how that translates into what they do at Western Kentucky. But if Tyson Helton's bringing the dude in, he's got to like what he sees in him and got to think that they can move the ball up and down the field. So, we talked about some departures. Stephen Duncan had transferred out. Davis Shanley is still here. Ty Story exhausted his eligibility, and he is gone. So there's a lot of shakeup in the room at the top. There are still some guys, QB2, QB3, QB4 even, I guess, that are hanging around. But let's talk quarterbacks. It was recently announced just last week or a couple days ago, heck, I lose track of time, that Piggy would be the starter for week one or game one. Let's call it game one against Louisville. So you get to look forward to that. Let's talk quarterback, Steve. All right, where does this unit stand in your eyes from where it was a year ago? Let's talk about that first.
I mean, it does suck to lose Duncan, who decided to transfer out, and obviously Story exhausted his eligibility. But I think that bringing in a guy with the arm talent and the leg talent that Piggy is going to bring, which the staff kind of molded their game plan with Ty Story last year, was a similar type player. He was more of a move the pack. He could just put his shoulder down and run up the middle. and bully his way to a few yards. He's a little bit bigger guy. Piggy's more of a find a crease, cut up field, and could really hurt you if he takes off with his legs. And even reading some feedback from Maryland fans, he really, in his time there, developed his ability to not always just take off first, because a lot of times those type of quarterbacks, they just, if option A is covered, they tuck and they go. And as he developed it in his career there, he developed reading through his progressions and not always just taking off and going. So I think the staff will be at a little bit of an advantage because they did mold someone with those similar traits last year. And, I really have a lot of confidence in Brian Ellis and Tyson Helton, putting Piggy in the best position to utilize his strengths. And luckily he has a lot of very solid position players around him. So really confident. That was a big question mark. It looked like it might have been Davis Shanley or Kavaris Thomas. And I still do kind of hate it for those guys. But when you have an opportunity to bring somebody in with his experience, I mean, we're gonna have to go with it. And I think we'll see a lot of success. As long as he can stay healthy. I know health has been his main kind of Achilles heel, so to speak. So if he can stay healthy, I think he's got plenty of weapons around him to have a good season.
Well, that's for sure. There definitely is a bounty of weapons, both in the backfield, the wide receiver core, and then we've talked about Joshua Simon at tight end, and then just flip it on the other side of the ball. You've got a stout defense that you expect will keep teams out of the end zone by and large. But let's talk about Piggy's stats from Maryland, just to give an idea to the folks what happened in 2019. Passing stats is 69 out of 180 or 118 for 719 yards, 3 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. And on the ground, I mean, it was okay. 45 official attempts for 153 net yards. So, of course, sacks count into that as well. But a little bit of both, a little bit of escapability. But, you playing against Big Ten defenses is going to be a lot different than playing against Conference USA defenses. So I like what you said about him being able to just find a crease and run. And I do remember quite vividly, there were plenty of plays where Ty Story would just take a snap and you're right, put his head down and try to bully through the line. And it worked from time to time, but that's not the type of player that Piggy seems to be. Should just be a nice compliment to, Gage Walker and the rest of those skill position players for Western Kentucky. Also on the roster at quarterback, you've still got Kavaris Thomas there, who came in several years ago, now a redshirt sophomore from just up the road where I'm from. He's where I'm living in Lakeland, Florida. 6'4", 250 pounder. I mean, 4-star recruit several years ago. I remember everybody was pumped when he came on campus, and still trying to find a role for the dude. I don't know how the heck he has just not stayed on the field, but here he is, and we're still trying to find a role. What about Kavaris Thomas? Where do you see him maybe fitting in this year?
I mean, even, going back to last year, hearing little whispers and rumors that he was working out with other position groups, a la, a Marshall guy that used to be a quarterback and converted to tight end. So, I kind of hate it for him. He's kind of been stuck behind some guys that have been older than him and, senior guys and grad transfer guys. And he is in his third year in the system. Obviously, his second year with Helton. But I think he'll get on the field more this season. I think the team will be more successful and have some better wins, where maybe even we're pulling a quarterback early and get him on the field, and I think they'll just design packages for him to get on the field, because surely, I think kind of next year I don't want to try to predict it, but I think next year he will be given the lion's share of the snaps in the fall ball, leading up to whatever the 2021 season looks like. I feel like he's kind of paid his dues and will be ready to go. And he's going to have a couple good guys to sit behind and learn. And, I think eventually he has to see the field, obviously. I mean, he stayed here, for now his third season. He hasn't transferred out, so that says a lot about him. And his talent is obviously there. I hate to say it's kind of been a good thing that he's had some upperclassmen to be behind and learn. So I think his time will come, and I think he'll get a chance to show what he's capable of when it's time.
Yeah, I mean, it's wild to me that, we just haven't seen him more than we have. And what's even wilder to me is that, according to Phil Steele, he is listed here as QB3. QB2, actually, according to Phil Steele, is a freshman, Grady Robeson, 6'1", 190-pounder, from all the way out there in Washington. So, what do you know about Robeson? I mean, to come in as a freshman and take QB2, according to Phil Steele, he talks to the coaches, so you got to think he knows something that we may not. What do you know about Robeson?
Yeah, I mean, I remember the staff being really excited when we signed him. I know he has a big arm and had a very successful junior season in high school, or a senior season in high school. Not going to be surprised to see just a red shirt. I don't know if you call it that. If everybody's getting eligibility back, I'm not sure exactly how that's going to look. I don't expect him to see any game time. Kind of tuck him away, let him learn the system and acclimate to being this far away from home, getting the playbook, develop a repertoire with the players, and maybe down the line be given an opportunity. Assuming he stays on the roster, you kind of always worry about those guys that are so far away from home that, possibly they could get homesick. Again, not predicting anything, just it does happen. But I do remember the staff being very high on that signing happened. And I know a lot of that came from Brian Ellis and his relationships from his time, spent over in that area of the world. Just knowing coaches, having relationships, and, getting a guy that they're really high on to sign. So hopefully, eventually, he is somebody that shines for us, but I wouldn't look for anything this year. Hopefully, barring injury, that doesn't happen. So, excited for his future, though, someday.
Well, it's taken long enough for us to get to this point, but now I guess we get to talk about who's the leading passer in a Hilltopper uniform that's currently on the roster, and I guess that's going to be Davis Shanley. He was a starter a few years ago, as folks will remember. 2018, played in 9 games, even started at 1 or 2 or something like that. But last year, he started 4 games. Okay, in 2019, it says appeared in just 1 game, had 1 attempt for 16 yards. So a vastly diminished role with the emergence of Ty Story, who really didn't see a significant playing time until like game 4 or something like that, if I remember correctly. But Davis Shanley, 6'1", 190-pound, now redshirt junior. I guess if the need arises, the one thing you can definitely say is you've got a quarterback that has game action under his belt. But thoughts on Davis Shanley in, God, what is this now, his 4th year with the program?
Yeah, I mean, if you remember a couple of years ago, we had Drew Eccles start the season. He got hurt.
Yeah.
Shanley came in. He got hurt. Duncan came in. Eccles tried to come back. And then they just kind of had a 3-way just trading off who was starting. Eccles started the Louisville game at Louisville a couple of years ago when we almost beat them. So he has some ability, good passer, not the strongest arm. He likes to run, but he doesn't exactly have the build to absorb a lot of hits like he does. He has had some injury concerns, but we do know that he should know the system very well. If he needs to get in there, I think he'll have just as good a chance as anybody to be successful with who's around him. I just think right now it's just he's been stuck behind a couple guys with possibly more arm talent than him. Even though between the ears and what he can do, I think he could put up good stats if we needed to and we were pressured to put him on the field. But I wouldn't expect to see a lot of Davis Shanley, though. I am glad that he stayed with the system. Again, kind of says a lot about him, just like it does Kavaris. Not afraid of competition and developing a role. So glad to have him on the squad still. Keep that quarterback room strong and not just full of question marks. Where if one guy went down, you'd literally have nobody with passing experience on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, all good points, but it says something about the Western Kentucky program that you have all these guys that have had playing time, and then that it's been taken away or the game plan has been altered, or some of the guys like Kavaris Thomas came in highly touted and just haven't seen the field. But what I'm getting at is it says something about the program that they stay there, that they're not like, dude, I'm out of here. Y'all told me I was going to be playing, or I was playing, and now I'm not, and I just want to play ball. I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere. And I get that every player wants to play. They worked hard to get to this level and then worked harder to earn a spot. And then in some cases it was there and now it's not there. But, these guys are staying with the program. There's just something to be said about that, because all too often, we see guys when the dust settles and the things shake out and you see where the pecking order lies on the 2 deep or whatever. And they're like, all right, I got to go somewhere and play. So, but one final quarterback we're going to talk about on the roster currently, another freshman from Raleigh, North Carolina, Darius Ocean, 6 foot, 195 pounder. I guess when it came down to it, according to his bio, he picked the Toppers over Georgia State. So, what do you know about Darius Ocean?
Yeah, I don't know as much about him. I do remember his signing day. I remember the staff being excited about him. But as far as what his strengths are, I'm not sure if he's more of a pro style or running quarterback. But again, just glad to have people, kind of developing that depth on the team behind Pegram, then having Kavaris and Shanley, and then having a couple freshmen back there. I think we have a good kind of progression of logical, just yearly depth there. Where as we turn someone over, you don't always want to have to depend on that graduate transfer to kind of throw the dart at the dartboard and hope you find somebody that will fit into your system. Eventually, you'd like to just develop and groom someone up. So I think we have some good people behind Pegram, and Darius Ocean being one of those that eventually, I think he's going to bring what he has to the table and get to compete for a spot. Because, if the staff liked him, I really have a lot of faith and trust in Helton and Ellis, just like I did with Jeff Brom. I always called him, jokingly the quarterback whisperer for what he did with Dowdy, and then what he was able to do with Mike White, coming from USF, with stats that, wouldn't have blown you away on paper. You'd look at it and be like, I think he had thrown like 10 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. And then he comes to Western and tosses, 38, 40 touchdowns his first year, including 5 in his first game against Rice. So, you look at Piggy's stats, don't blow you away, but I trust the guys that are going to put him in position and draw up the game plans for him, just like I trust them to develop the younger guys that are going to be coming up and learning in the system and learning from those older guys that eventually they're going to get a shot. And I think they're going to be in good hands to be successful when that time comes.
Yeah, I vividly remember when Mike White came in and we were talking several times, and I'm like, man, you just don't plug in a 4,500-yard passer and 40 touchdown passer. And you were confident that it was going to happen anyway. Even though those stats are gaudy, you had faith that this staff at the time was going to be able to do that. And, man, they did. And I don't think Tyson Helton was any small part of that at all. And Brian Ellis was on staff at that point too. So, I know that you wanted those guys. You felt like Helton should have just stayed and been the next head coach after Brom. It didn't work out that way, but ultimately they got him back, and we see that was probably would have been the best decision overall. But, I love what these guys are able to do with quarterbacks, and far too often some teams get that graduate transfer year after year after year, and they can just never make it materialize. And, so far, Helton's 1 for 1 doing that. We'll see if they can make it 2 for 2. So let's talk about the 4 big questions, and then we will get out of here. Well, we won't get out of here. We'll flip it over on a break, and then we'll talk about the coaching staff. So who's the biggest loss if we don't already know the answer to this? Who's the biggest loss out of the quarterback room from 2019?
Yeah, it's Stephen Duncan. He decided to go down to the FCS level to Tarleton State. Kind of made a business decision, what was best for him. He had graduated, he had gotten his degree, and decided to pursue somewhere where he could start to set up for his life after football. So don't blame him at all. He did have the opportunity to come back, but they kept waving the grad transfer thing in front of him, where they were actively looking for a grad transfer. So you kind of understand his position. He had had moderate success, had a lot of potential there, just his ability with his strong arm, though it never materialized to, big gaudy stats. He still would have been a nice known entity to have back for another year, to kind of stabilize that position in that room. But, all's well that ends well. He's definitely the biggest loss, though I think we will be okay in that regard.
Yeah. I'm with you. Stephen Duncan's obviously got to be the biggest loss because he's really the only one that would have returned that's gone. Story had no eligibility left. So even though that was a massive loss, you weren't getting anything there because there's no more eligibility to be had. So how about a breakout player from the quarterback room?
We could have a clean sweep here with Piggy, but I'm not gonna go with Piggy. I'm gonna go with Kavaris, because I think that this kind of has to be the year, whether it be injury or whether it just be developing more packages for him, the way they that we kind of did a couple years ago with Shanley, where he would come in for a series in the second quarter and the third quarter. I think eventually you just have to get Kavaris Thomas on the field. It just has to happen so that next year it's not just totally brand new. I think he only has 1 or 2 passing attempts in his career. He's got to get some mop-up time or something. So I think Kavaris is going to see some game time and get some stats under his belt and just show what he's got. Kind of shake those cobwebs and that rust off and show the fan base, what he's bringing to the program. I think it's his time to break out.
Yeah, looking at the stats, man, that was rushing stats. Gosh, I thought I was passing stats. There it is. 2018, 1 attempt. 2019, 1 attempt. So it's been sparing. But I'm with you, man. If the guy is this big, that good of an athlete, to come out so highly touted out of a talent-rich state like the state of Florida at a marquee position like quarterback, you've got to find a spot for him on the field. And even if it is, you alluded to Xavier Gaines and what Marshall's done with him, he came out as a very highly touted quarterback, dual threat quarterback from the state of Florida as well, whose laundry list of offers was a who's who of college football. But Marshall found a way to get him on the field, and it's worked out. And now they put him in special packages of plays where it's not just wildcat. He's also throwing passes and this, that, and the other. And if that's what you got to do, then that's what you got to do. But let's hope that he finds the field in a quarterback position from blowout wins and the ability to, just go ahead and sub some guys in, take some risks, run some plays, and it's ultimately not going to hurt you. But, you can't just leave him on the sidelines for one more year and then hand him the keys of the kingdom next year and go, all right, dude, it's yours. Ease him in, get his feet wet, let him take some hits and make some throws and all that good stuff. I mean, at the end of the day, the dude's a football player. But for me, breakout player, I mean, I'm cheating a little bit, but it's got to be Piggy. He's never taken a snap in a Hilltopper uniform, and he's named QB1, so he's my breakout guy. Who's your MVP this year from the quarterback position?
Yeah, I mean, it's got to be Piggy. I mean, he's been named the Week 1 starter, and you'd have to expect that barring any unforeseen health issues like, Stephen Duncan had last year with the broken foot against Louisville, you've got to assume that he's going to play most of the games and have most of the snaps. So MVP's got to be him. It's going to kind of literally ride on his shoulders, on his arms, on his legs, what he can accomplish. And I think he's going to have a good year. I think this system and our coaches are going to put him in position to have a solid kind of senior year for him.
Hey, man, if the dude comes in and gets a win over Louisville in the first game of the year, that'll solidify his status in the eyes of a lot of Hilltopper fans already as being the MVP of the season, because that should set the tone for what should happen against Conference USA schools. But I'm with you. I'm going ahead and call Piggy or whoever QB1 is for the majority of the season, because that just, I mean, it has to be. Who you most excited to see this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely Piggy. I mean, just watching his game film from Maryland, definitely you can see he's kind of an electric player. Reading, stats and interviews with him, he wants to prove that he can be a pocket style quarterback and sit back there and make reads and throw the ball. So, he wants to develop his game and prove he's not just a runner. Kind of his health history kind of forces him that way. He can't just run or he's going to get hurt. So I'm excited to see, him get the ball to Pearson, to Sloan, to Simon, Craig Burt, Gage Walker out of the backfield. Yeah, I'm excited to see him throw the ball around and let those weapons go to work. So I think, Piggy's he's gonna surprise some people. He's gonna have a good year.
Well, let's absolutely hope so. And I'm also in agreement with you. I'm most excited to see Piggy and how he commands this Hilltopper offense. And specifically, I mean, look, right out of the gate, Marshall had the luxury of a tune-up game, what turned into being a tune-up game against Eastern Kentucky today as we record. But, man, it would have been a nice luxury for Western Kentucky to get a tune-up game, too, before heading to Louisville. But the guys had big game experience already, so a tune-up for him probably isn't necessary. It just would have been nice to get some continuity and some chemistry built before heading into a big game. But, hey, like I said before, if he comes in and can shock Louisville at home, man, that'll be one for the ages right there. So let's say hot take time for the quarterbacks.
I mean, I think Piggy – it's hard to say hot take for the Hilltopper quarterback position, but I think Piggy is going to exceed the stats that Ty Story had last year. I think he's going to throw for more yards, more touchdowns, and I think he's going to lead us to just as many wins. I think we're going to have another 8-win regular season, so with potential to get 9 in the bowl game. So I think Piggy, granted, he might have the luxury of more games because Story didn't start those first 3 games, but I think Piggy is going to exceed the person that he's succeeding. So Piggy is going to leapfrog Ty Story and put up better numbers than what Ty Story did last year.
Well, let's toss those numbers out then, because last year Ty Story passed for 2,567 yards and 14 touchdowns against 7 interceptions, and also ran for a net gain of 276 yards and another 7 touchdowns on the ground. So that's nothing to sneeze at, to be honest with you. I mean, geez, he accounted for 21 touchdowns in I don't know how many games it was, but if Pig can stay healthy, you're looking at 11 opportunities if all games get played. And then you toss in the potential of a Conference USA championship game and or a bowl game, and you're looking at potentially 13 opportunities. So you get to play 13 games. Yeah, I think you're going to surpass those numbers. But if he stays healthy and all the games get played, the season doesn't get cut short, and the Toppers play like we expect him to play, that 13th game, which would ultimately be 13 if you make the conference championship game, because they're going to make a bowl game. He will surpass Ty Story's stats. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I'm going to say that, here's where it gets weird. Phil Steele has ranked this quarterback unit, 8th in the Conference USA, and that's with the addition documented of Piggy. So right down the middle of the conference, tied with Old Dominion, for crying out loud. But some of these rankings are a little skewed because FAU was ranked number 1. As we all know, Chris Robinson is not playing for the Owls. Marshall was ranked number 5, but that was with Isaiah Green taken into consideration. And of course, he has departed for the redshirt freshman Grant Wells, who played pretty well today. But I think that when it's all said and done, Western Kentucky will rank probably in the top 5 overall in net passing in the conference. And the string of graduate transfer quarterbacks continues to be a positive for the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers. So hang with us. On the other side of this break, we're going to break down real quick for you the Western Kentucky coaching staff. We'll get you familiar with all the guys in case you aren't familiar with all the guys. And then we'll get Steven's 2020 Conference 2020 Western Kentucky season predictions. Hang with us. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. All right, we're back. Steve, let's talk about this coaching staff. It's been a good one. First year they were all together last year. New head coach Tyson Helton put up +6 in the win column over the season before when Mike Sanford was the head coach. So Helton and most of this staff is entering its second season. Some first-year guys, but let's talk about them. Tyson Helton entering his second season he was most recently, before the head coach, was an offensive coordinator at the University of Tennessee. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Okay, that's what I thought. So I know you're a huge fan of Tyson Helton. You wanted to see him 2 years before he got back to the Hill. So talk to me about what you really like about Tyson Helton, and then we'll move down the staff.
Just listening to the players talk about Helton and not just interviews when they're talking to media, but even, social media, stuff that's gone on, just in today's environment, with the Black Lives Matter movement and stuff like that. I think he's really engaged as a player's coach. I think they really like him and respect him. And I think when your leader is someone that you respect, you'll do anything to perform at a high level and do what they expect you to do. So I think with that being said, and with his pedigree of, playing or coaching with Jeff Brom, and then going to USC and being with his brother, going to Tennessee, and then ultimately coming back to Western, I think he's paid his dues. He kind of showed that last year. There weren't a lot of kind of rookie freshman coaching mistakes that I remember, during the Sanford era. It was kind of painful to watch. Even when Brom first became a head coach, there were some game management systems that were tough to watch, even back to Taggart. Just game management, timeouts, clock management, just head-scratching stuff. Helton kind of came in a little bit more seasoned. He's a coach's son, had a lot of experience coming in, and really as a player developer and relationship builder, he's a guy you want leading your program. And I think Todd Stewart knows that he's ultimately probably going to be destined for bigger things in his future. And I think similar to how he did when Petrino was at Western, and he, had secondary plans to make Brom, next in waiting. I think Todd Stewart is even already looking forward to, this guy's going to be so successful, he's going to win himself a better job, and is already developing people under him to take those leadership roles whenever that does occur. So you can't be, happier to have anyone than Helton running the program. He does it the right way. His players like playing for him. Never have heard one negative thing about him. So definitely glad to have him back and most of his staff with him. So expect another step forward from last year, which is already a huge leapfrog forward.
I mean, Tyson Helton is the kind of guy that you want leading your program. And we said it, I mentioned it in the previous segment. We were talking about quarterbacks. There's guys that are facing a lot of adversity with either playing time or having but playing time diminishing, and they're still there. And that's because you got to think it's because of the head coach and the surrounding assistant coaches. Like, why risk going to another program that may not be as well coached as this one is? And so they're willing to put up with those personal adversities for the betterment of the team concept. And let's face it, Helton just gets it. I mean, being on the Hill, he gets it. He gets what the expectation is. He was there for, the piles and piles of yardage and points and championships and all that stuff. So he knows that it can be done, and he has the recipe to get it done. And the fact that you were able to go, there was no rebuilding year. I mean, it +6 right out of the gate. That's pretty amazing. I remember thinking back, and none of us thought it would be that high. We thought, yeah, Western will flirt around with bowl eligibility. Ultimately, we think they'll get it, but nobody was thinking 9 wins. I mean, even best case scenario, we probably weren't thinking 9 wins. We thought, yeah, they'll be bowl eligible and that'll be good, but this year will be the year. They'll have it all together, and he did it right out of the gate. Offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, Brian Ellis, second year in a return stint with the Toppers. He was on staff back when Helton was offensive coordinator, and Jeff Brom was the head coach. He was in 2014, 15, and 16, he was all on staff, offensive quality control, then running backs coach, and then 2016 passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach before departing with Helton to USC. Again, this is the same, another guy we thought would be on the next staff after Brom left. We just figured everybody would take a step up. I figured that he would go straight into offensive coordinator when Helton became head coach, and ultimately it didn't happen, but it did. It just took 2 extra years. So, and again, I remember thinking when he left that he was probably going to be an offensive coordinator somewhere, and nobody hired him after he called that beautiful bowl game and really put a thrashing. What was that, Memphis? The Toppers put a thrashing on? Man, yes, they put a thrashing on him. And I thought for sure that earned him a job somewhere. It did. He went to USC, but I thought it would earn him a coordinator spot somewhere. So thoughts on having Brian Ellis back in a second stint with the Tops?
Yeah, I'm really excited for him to still be on staff. Think, hit that Memphis game that you mentioned when Coach Holt was the interim coach after Brom had accepted the job. He kind of just opened the playbook and was like, just let's go out there and have fun and win this ball game and just utilize all these weapons. And he just kind of showed his diversity. He's a smart guy. He obviously knew Brom's system and was able to implement it, just as well as Brom did, because we had a huge game and won that game going away. And I think, he's still a very young guy. I think that is really the only thing that was stopping him from leapfrogging straight from, kind of a offensive kind of assistant without a real coordinator title to jumping straight to a coordinator role. I think his age and lack of experience was the only thing stopping him. Now he's getting a couple years under his belt. I really think that he's eventually, going to be somebody's number 2 real soon. Clayton White is kind of our groomed associate head coach, kind of the coach in waiting if and when Helton is plucked away. But I think Brian Ellis is kind of going to be that next guy that is given that opportunity. Hopefully it's here. If I'm not mistaken, he may have some UAB ties. But I hope he doesn't get plucked away and go anywhere else. Smart guy. I think he's going to be that offensive mastermind eventually in the future, similar to what Brom was, and can open that playbook up and hopefully be that next quarterback whisperer, because he's shown he can do it. But now he kind of got to develop his own guys the way he did Ty Story last year. He's going to get another chance with Piggy this year. Hopefully Kavaris in the future. So love having him on staff. Trust that our offense and our quarterbacks are in great shape with him. Whatever he decided to do, really trust him.
Yeah, I'm glad he's back too. He absolutely dazzled in the bowl game. I thought he was a quality assistant coach, wide receivers coach or whatever then, because passing game coordinator is what I was aiming for there. Because those guys have their hands on the playbook. They have their hands in the game plan. And you could tell when he got his shot after Brom took the Purdue job that you said it, he opened the playbook up, just wanted to have fun. And they had the athletes across the field to make a lot of those plays work. So it just made for an entertaining game, and it ultimately worked out to be one hell of an audition tape. But yeah, you mentioned he has UAB ties. Yeah, he played quarterback at UAB from 2007 to 2011, and then was a graduate assistant there immediately following his playing career. So he's probably one of those guys that's high on their list when it comes down to it. But maybe he'll be the next head coach at Western Kentucky, because we're going to transition right into the guy you just mentioned. That's defensive coordinator Clayton White, entering his 4th season at Western Kentucky, a guy that we absolutely are both astounded is still on staff because of the job he has done the past couple of years in particular. So, look, we could sing praises all day long, but I know you are a huge fan of Clayton White. So let's talk about him for a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I was shocked when we kept him around, 2 years ago, just with the turnaround that the defense made. And now, given another year and going from a 3-9 team to a 9-win team, no doubt in my mind that he was getting calls and sniffs and offers from, I don't want to say bigger, better programs, but just opportunities for him to develop his professional career and probably make more money, which is what it's about. But he chose to stay at Western and to continue to develop, basically, 9-10 returning seniors, defensive unit that is going to take hopefully another step forward, win a lot of ball games, and hopefully eventually basically set himself up for a head coaching job, wherever that may be. Great we have him on staff. I mean, I just what he's done, where he's taken us defensively, and those 4 years. I mean, you really just going from Nick Holt, who kind of did the same thing. Took us from a really rough-looking team in 2013-14 to somebody in 2016 that was dominant. Kind of started all over, retooled in 17 with Clayton, and now he's got all his guys in there, all his horses, and I mean, they're dominant. I mean, there's several guys that are going to get NFL looks. D'Angelo Malone could possibly be a 2nd-round guy. It's just you can't say enough good things about him. Hopefully he gets a head coaching chance. Hopefully it's at Western if that has to happen. But if not, I mean, we've been lucky to have him for several years now.
Yeah. Also, in his 2nd stint with Western Kentucky way back in 2010, he was a co-special teams coordinator and defensive backs coach. But look, in a more recent tip, do you really have to look any farther than what happened last year? One of the premier passing duos, in not just in the entire conference, but in the entire G5. D'Angelo Malone, Defensive Player of the Year in the Conference USA, preseason All-American in 2020 by several major media outlets. I mean, the job that the guy has done is just phenomenal. When we saw Jimmy Lindsey depart to Illinois to be with Lovie Smith on his staff, I thought for sure that it wouldn't be too much longer until Clayton White got a call as well. And he's one of those coaches that you just got to appreciate while he's here, because you never want to see any coach move on. But, man, I mean, it just feels like he's been on, like, borrowed time at Western for a couple of years because of the job he's been doing. Like, borrowed time in a good way. So if he's around for another year or so, or, you know, if Helton runs the table, does something phenomenal, and then gets a larger budgeted offer, let's put it that way. We won't say bigger and better school, because that's not really what it is. It's just a larger budgeted school. Then perhaps Clayton White is the man to take the helm at Western because of the job he has done. And I don't think too many fans would be upset with that. Moving on to a first-year guy at Western Kentucky. Let's talk about co-offensive coordinator, running backs coach Ryan Applin, most recently offensive coordinator at North Alabama. What do we know about Coach Applin?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure he played at Arkansas State. If you're looking at his bio.
Yeah, quarterback.
Yeah, from our Sun Belt days. Remember him being a really, 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 really solid player, and knowing some people kind of behind the scenes, when we were able to pick him up. I mean, they've said nothing but good things about him. Smart guy. Kind of in my opinion, and from what I hear from them, they're kind of setting themselves up for that next ladder step movement. Whenever that happens, Clayton White, Brian Ellis, they're hoping to just plug and play guys, right into new positions. Kind of just thinking forward as him being another young, up and coming, successful person that can help win some ball games and develop some players. So don't know a lot about him as a coach. He's still relatively young and experienced. But he played the game. He was successful. He's smart. And, the buzz I've heard about him has been strong in the community. So, excited to have him on staff and to see what he can do.
Yeah, he was Arkansas State quarterback from 2008 to 2012. It says here 2-time Sun Belt Conference Player of the Year. So the man knows a thing or two about quarterbacking. That's a definite. He's been in the coaching game since basically right after his playing career. Ole Miss, administrative assistant, Auburn, Northern Alabama, UT Chattanooga, and then, like I said, the last couple of years been OC at North Alabama before joining the Toppers as co-OC and running backs coach. So probably what you would consider as the beginning steps of what could be a fast riser or a quick up and comer. And before we move on, I want to make a point, because you keep saying that it looks like these guys are positioning themselves for the next step potentially at Western Kentucky. And it seems like Western Kentucky is one of those schools that's okay with doing that. And when Trace and I were talking about this Herd staff, I asked him specifically, would you like to see, or do you think that offensive coordinator Tim Cramsey might get a crack at the job after Doc Holliday departs? And he goes, I'm not necessarily a big fan of just elevating an assistant coach. He's a bigger fan of potentially a national search. And it just seems like that's not necessarily the game plan. Is that do you think that might be a little bit of kind of lesson learned from a couple of years ago when they went outside the house and brought in Mike Sanford, and ultimately that didn't work out the way we thought it was going to work out?
Yeah, I mean, they had to learn that continuity and player trust, and just knowing what you already have in the building and what they're going to do, what they're strong at, what they're not strong at. You're putting them in position to be successful by grooming them to the standards that you already have set, rather than just, hey, bring in a Mike Sanford that says we're going to play for a New Year's Six Bowl every year. Love that goal. Love that ambition. Sounds great saying it into a microphone, but that's, once every 10, 20 year maybe happening, unless you're a Boise State or just a power G5 team that is doing it year in, year out. It sounds good, but just that continuity and building relationships is more about what leadership's about than just throwing big promises out to donors that want to hear you say we're going to go do these things. Be in the building, developing relationships, and graduating players. That's really what it's about.
Yeah. I mean, I tend to think that as well. The system that they seem to have or like to have in place at Western Kentucky seems like, it's fan-friendly, exciting football. People want to come and watch it. They don't want to see a 7-3 game. They want to see yardage and points on the board, and they have a staff now that is adept at doing that. They've done it before. So why go out of house? You have a lot of guys here that, that were around when that was happening before. So it's just interesting, the two dynamics and the two thought processes of one staff versus the other, and, how you and Trace see things a little bit differently in relation to your own particular favorite team. But I just wanted to talk about that a second before we talk about co-defensive coordinator and linebackers coach entering his 4th season with the Tops, Mo Crum. Let's talk about Maurice Crum. What do you like about Mo?
Well, I know he's been very instrumental, very successful on the recruiting path. When he got elevated to that position, kind of after Jimmy Lindsey left. Again, in my eyes, it's just kind of ultimately setting the ladder up for eventually Clayton White elevating, whether it's in-house or out-of-house. They're grooming that guy to be the next defensive coordinator. And, if they're happy with the job he's doing, and we can obviously see the players that are being brought in, they're being successful. We're talking about Trace's opinion. I like having this young, energetic staff that seems to be recruiting well, and promoting from guys from within. Even personally, in my job experience, that you have the most success that way versus fishing people outside and bringing them in and not knowing what you're going to get, because anybody can look good on paper, but knowing what you have in-house and what you're bringing to the table usually leads to better results, because you know what you have and what they're going to bring to the table. So I like kind of cultivating the kind of the grassroots that we're doing, building these young guys up internally, and growing them into hopefully successful position coaches and put them in a position to succeed. And I think Mo Crum is kind of that next guy that he's going to get a bigger role, and hopefully it's with us and he's successful.
Yeah, look, Mo Crum has been on staff since 2017, and from 2017 to 2019, he was a linebackers coach, which he still is, but he was also co-special teams coordinator in 2018. You talk about him being heavily involved on the recruiting trail. And look, let's talk about some of the guys that have been under his tutelage while he's been linebackers coach, and we really don't have to go any further back than Iggy. I mean, because he's absolutely one of the most talented guys to roll through that program in recent history, and he's going to vie for a lot more playing time with the Chicago Bears this year. So, it's not just successful collegiate players that you're seeing. Western's putting guys in the pros, and Mo Crum is no small part of that. So, another guy that is just high energy. The kids seem to love him. The recruiting is just like there's no days off, and you got to love that. So the staff, when you just look at it, is, I can't name every single guy from memory, but when we start talking about them and I start to think back about some things that I'd kind of forgotten about, it makes me appreciate what's going on in Bowling Green a hell of a lot more than normal. And just another note, I don't know where a lot of these guys come from, like where their hometown is, but I'm looking at Mo Crum, and he's another guy that's like right down the road. He's from right down the road from where I live. This is kind of amazing to me. So let's talk about a second-year coach, safeties and special teams coordinator, Andy LaRusso. He came to Western in December of 2018. So this will be his second full season on the Hill. You talked about the turnaround of special teams last year. There's got to be a coordinator for all that, and it's Andy LaRussa. So what do you like about Coach LaRussa?
I mean, you just have to like that we've seen progression. Whereas, 2017-18, we saw a unit go from number 1 in the nation to, number 120, I believe it was,
Yep.
in 18.
Well, yeah, number 1 in 16, 87 in 17, 120 in 2018, and then 55 last year.
Yeah, so you saw a trend of going the wrong way from number 1 to number 120 over a couple year period, and then to go to 55 last year. You expect that next step up, especially with so many guys coming back. I fully expect that to be a top 25 to 30 unit, like I mentioned earlier, in the special team segment. I think that continuity of players and coaching staff, familiarity, knowing what to expect and what to bring to the table, and then even helping bring a couple of transfer guys in, a kicker coming in, a long snapper coming in. I have no doubt that he had some role in that occurring, buying people into the system. You have to be happy about that. When you see progression and improvement and continuity, he's obviously doing something right. So, definitely glad to have him back, and that unit should be strong and develop even more under him.
Yeah, look, this is one of these unique things that I've got to talk about as I'm looking at the profile of Andy LaRussa. He's from Pasadena, California. So you've got a guy all the way out on the West Coast who's now coaching in Kentucky and far more east than before. And he's found a punter from all the way across the world and brought him here. So football is such a weird, wild sport sometimes, and that's just one of those things. You've got a California kid who's coaching in Kentucky with an Australian punter. Pretty amazing stuff. But look, I'm looking at his coaching career background, and it's pretty obvious that he's one of those guys that just likes special teams because it's heavily special teams on the resume. Cornerbacks coach, special teams coach all the way back in 09-10, and then special teams coach with San Jose State 2011-12. Departed from special teams for a couple of years, and then right back in 2015 with UNLV for 3 years as special teams coordinator, safety coach, and then USC with Helton and them, special teams analyst, and bam, now he's at Western, special teams coordinator. Special teams is so underappreciated, and when you can find a guy who has made a career out of being good at it, then you want to lock that dude down. So I don't think you're too far off. I don't know if we'll be able to see, it's hard to be number 1 in the nation at anything. And to be able to do that in 2016 was pretty amazing. But to cut, 65 spots off of where they were ranked in 2018 versus 2019 is pretty amazing. So to think that they could be a top 30, top 20 unit, it's not out of the realm of possibility. Defensive ends coach, first year on the Hill, Kenny Baker. Not too familiar with him. Let me look at see where he was his last stop. UT Chattanooga defensive line coach, and then comes to the Hill in 2020. What do you know about Coach Baker?
Just what I've seen recruiting side-wise, just as he's been recruiting, social media stuff, it seems like another energetic guy in the room, even though we haven't necessarily seen how that will translate to on the field. The recruiting side of it is about building relationships. And I think coaching is just a continuation of that relationship and establishing trust and respect, and then getting the most out of your people. So I think he's off on the right foot. I think he seems like an energetic person. UTC, while it may not be a household name, is a pretty good program as far as talent that they developed. They're not a huge national name by any means, but I think he's coming up the right way. And I think Western is a good stop for him, whether it be a career or just a stepping stone somewhere else. But I think we could internally develop him, like we mentioned with all these other guys. I think there's going to be opportunities in the future for him to grow, hopefully within our house. But if not, I think we'll develop his career in some way and the better for him, whether that's here or somewhere else.
Well, at certain places on every coaching staff, you have to have those young guys that relate to these younger players, these kids coming out of high school. Because let's face it, man, when you're 30, 35 years old, 40 years old, 50 years old, it's pretty hard to relate to somebody that's 17, 18, 19 years old and try to sell them on coming to your program. So every staff is going to have those younger guys that absolutely gets the vibe of what's going on with the current crop of juniors and seniors and stuff like that. And if Kenny Baker is that guy that is just killing it on the recruiting trail with Mo Crum and they're loved by these prospects, so be it, man, because you got to get the players in before they can produce on the field. And if he's doing that, what more can you ask for? I mean, he's also, happens to be coaching the defensive ends, and he gets the luxury of having an All-American on one side and an extremely dangerous pass rusher in Juwan Jones on the other side. So they could make him look way better this year just from sheer talent alone. So he's fallen into a really good situation being the defensive ends coach in 2020 for the Tops. All right, how about wide receivers coach entering his second year on the Hill, Chris Chestnut? Comes to Western Kentucky as being the wide receivers coach at Tennessee State. And like I said, last 2 years, entering his second year on the Hill now. Chris Chestnut seems to be, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there. He seems to be one of those other young, vibrant, energetic coaches that relates well to these guys. He's filling the field with talent. At the wide receiver core, we talked about it in position group breakdowns. There's no shortage of talent. They're pulling some legit guys one way or another, eligibility issues or not, grade issues or not, JUCO, whatever. They're here, and now they're set to shine. So what do you like about Chris Chestnut?
Yeah, the one thing that stands out to me about him, and obviously it doesn't hurt to have a Lucky Jackson on your team, Quinn Jernigan, guys of those nature. But just I've seen him in the community. I remember this time last year before the first game, I remember seeing him obviously after a practice or something at B-Dubs with basically the whole wide receiver group, and just seeing his interaction with those guys, just seeing him, go down the road, talking to the table, talking to each and every single person there. You can read a vibe, you can feel it. And the connection was there. It wasn't, awkward conversation of, oh, coach is here, I got to talk to him. No, I mean, it just looked like just people connecting. And it doesn't hurt to have a lot of good players on your position group. And when you look at who he has, Pearson and Sloan and Craig Burt and Xavier Lane, and that's just, the top crop of four. I feel like, he's going to continue to develop some good wide receivers, continue to help recruit good players to the Hill. And, again, my belief is relationships first. Build your relationships with your players, and that'll lead to a lot of success. And just seeing them in the community, interacting with the players and the players embracing him, I think that's the first step to being a very successful coach.
Yeah. I mean, 100% agreement. Close the book. I'm in 100% agreement with all that. So let's move along to offensive line. Second year on the Hill, Mike Goff. I mean, this is a guy that spent a ton of time in the NFL. He was an all-pro at one point in time. Was with Helton on the USC staff. Well, he was there with him, but he was also there before him. And he brings him to the Hill. So a guy that knows a little bit of something about the offensive line, played for a long, long time. Let me see. Although it was starting back in 98 to 2003 with the Bengals, 2004 to 2008 with the Chargers, and then 2009 with the Chiefs. So the guy played 11 years in the NFL and was an All-Pro, I think, in 2005. I think the guy knows a little bit of something about offensive line play. So has the luxury of having one of the better, if not the best, we'll see, we'll see offensive line in Western Kentucky's starters across the board. So what has Mike Goff been able to do with these units to, really improve over the previous regime?
I mean, it doesn't hurt having someone with that much NFL experience. I mean, somebody that's walked the walk, talked the talk, been in the league, and can really coach guys up on here's what to expect and what you need to do if you want to get to the next level. And I think there may be several guys across that line, whether seniors or not, that want to play at the next level. And just, having a coach that almost looks like he could still play. I mean, if you see Mike Goff, he's just a stocky individual, imposing individual, and obviously earned his accolades and cut his teeth, for an average NFL lifespan of 3 years to play 11 years in the league and be that recognized with All-Pro recognitions. I mean, the guy obviously brings a lot of knowledge, a lot of just believability. When someone can say, I was in the NFL, I've done it against the best, and he's using that to not only coach guys, but he's also recruiting guys. And, we brought in several, young linemen that could be those next huge name guys, although right now they're behind a very senior heavy line. Even though this year may be senior heavy and next year may be a fresh crop of faces, I don't, the pessimistic side of me is going to say, yeah, there will be a drop off. But the optimistic side is going to say these guys have been coached up by a good guy. So I think we're in good hands with Goff. When you've had someone that's done it at that level, you really had to put a lot of trust in him. I think he brings that to the table, and they're going to be great this year, and we're going to be okay going forward. Even as some seniors start to graduate, we'll be fine.
Yeah, let's take it back even a step further beyond the NFL. Before that, he played his college ball at Iowa, which is historically known to pump out some stellar offensive linemen. So at that point he was coached by great college coaches, and then had some of the best coaches in the world in the NFL for 11 years or 12 years or whatever. And you're right. For all we know, the next Forrest Lamp is on the roster right now, waiting his turn. The next Max Halpin might be on the roster, waiting his turn. So as long as Mike Goff is the offensive line coach at Western Kentucky, you got to think that position group is in good hands. And you may be able to talk about them the same way that you yourself talk about Marshall, and the fact that they continually field a solid offensive line year in and year out. And that's what you want. Continuity. There's never a drop off. It's just a reloading thing. And if you're going to reload somewhere, the offensive line is a great place to do that. So let's talk about a second-year coach on a position group that a lot of Hilltoppers take a lot of pride in, because they've been putting in dudes in the NFL for quite a while now, and that's the tight end position. So let's talk about Zach Langford. Second year, like I said, with the Toppers, comes to Western Kentucky after a 2-year stint at Faulkner as the offensive line coach. In his second stint with the Western Kentucky Hilltoppers as well, he was a GA in 2014 and offensive quality control in 15 and 16. So he was here when the Toppers were riding high. And of course, I mentioned that a lot of Topper fans take pride in the tight end position because of the guys that they've been able to crank into the NFL for several years now. Thoughts on Zach Langford? We know he's got a known entity and a real weapon, at least in Joshua Simon. What do you like about Zach Langford?
Well, I like that it seems to kind of be continuing the trend. He's another, still relatively new, younger coach. But I think it also says a lot that it's his second stint in Bowling Green. He was here before, in a lesser position, lesser role, went and had an opportunity to go somewhere else, and then decided to come back, to Bowling Green, to Western, knowing the expectations and the growing kind of football fanhood that is here in Bowling Green. He obviously has the luxury of inheriting a solid tight end in Josh Simon, but he knows the expectation. He came back to Western, knowing the community, knowing the expectation, and again, it just there seems to be just a very consistent, just kind of a second level. I don't want to say second level coaches, but kind of proper progression of, we got some young guys here that, whenever that natural growth does occur, we've got guys ready to step up and do more. And he's been here, he's been successful. He's seen successful coaches, went elsewhere, had opportunity to grow, came back, and he's going to fall into more success because you've got a guy that's 6'5" and is a mismatch across the middle of the field, Josh Simon. So he's going to look really good, and hopefully continue to develop the talent that he has on his tight end group.
Another note, man, this is a very UAB heavy staff. Zach Langford played tight end at UAB as well. So, man, I don't know what I think Helton was on staff at UAB at one point. So that's got to be where he came in contact with a lot of these guys. But he's just bringing them along for the ride, and that's good. So if you see quality coaches, this is what it's all about. You keep saying it's about building relationships, and that's what the coaching game is by and large. Now, last guy we're going to talk about is a Western Kentucky alum, and that's defensive tackles coach Kenny Martin in his fourth season with Western Kentucky. 2016, 2017 defensive graduate assistant, and then 2018-19 has been coaching the defensive tackles for Western. Well, another one of these younger guys, younger coaches that has been doing a pretty phenomenal job. Last year, defensive tackles played really well. It's a little bit of turnover this year, but some big playmakers are back. So what about Kenny Martin? Let's close it out on a strong note.
Yeah, I think it helps when you're coaching kids in something that you can get right in beside them and do. Not just say this is what I say do as I say, not as I do. This is a guy that's built for it, can jump in, has recently done it, and the players are going to know who he is, and they relate to him. And again, young guy. That's kind of what we see. There's some good experience at the top of our coaching staff, and then kind of those second tier position player coaches, younger guys, enthusiastic, good, hopefully relationships being developed and learning how to become eventually good quality coordinators. So love to see a guy like that that's kind of homegrown, played here, graduated here, wanted to be on staff because he knows what the Hill has and what it has to offer. And I think he's going to be just another good, young, successful coach that hopefully grows up and eventually is, that Clayton White, head defensive coordinator. That's my goal for him.
Yeah, I'm going to give you one more note on him. I know that he played at Western and he's back at Western as a coach. He even had a stint in 2014. He was the Warren Central High School defensive coordinator. So how about that? But hey, quality staff here in Bowling Green. Let me go back and see where they rank, where Phil still ranks this staff. Ranks this staff at 8th, and I don't know what he has been smoking when you talk about that, but probably the same thing whenever he decided to rank Middle Tennessee State as second in the East after that phenomenal showing that we saw against Army today. We always love to be able to take a jab at the whatever. I mean, Middle Tennessee did a fabulous job today. Anyway, I mean, even UTEP got a win, but Middle Tennessee State could not grab even a point. But
6-6, Rick.
That's right, baby. I saw today. I mean, I got to say this. I didn't know this was the situation, but he has a self-extending contract that is currently valid until 2024.
As long as they hit 6 wins, it automatically adds another year. Yeah.
What? Oh my God. I don't know who his agent is, but I need that phone number to that dude right now because that's a phenomenal deal. I mean, if you're willing to accept 6 wins, wow. Okay.
They will have him until he decides to retire.
Wow. Okay. That's your Middle Tennessee State portion of the podcast. We're going to transition now. We're going to get Moff's 2020 season outlook, expectations, and then we're going to get out of here this week. And then we'll look forward to previewing week 1 against Louisville here in a couple of days. So 11 games on the schedule. I mentioned it. Excuse me. Toppers don't play back-to-back home games until late November. So you're alternating away at home, away at home. You play 2 on the road and then 2 at home and close out on the road. So we can go game by game if you want to, but we can talk about what just looking at the schedule. I'm sure you've glanced at it plenty of times. What do you feel is the high mark, the low mark, and most likely where do you think Western's going to land when it's all said and done?
Just looking at our schedule with BYU added, and then the Louisville game, Liberty, Chattanooga. The biggest tests are going to be at UAB, who is going to be a conference favorite, and then the at Louisville game. I mean, those are the two, in my opinion, the most likely losses. I mean, if you have to pencil in toss-ups and which way it's going to go, I would predict that we'd lose at Louisville. Even though we beat UAB last year, they do have a very, very, very long win streak going on in Birmingham for home games. So, not going to be easy just to go there and win a game. Other than that, going at FAU, the only kind of question mark there is they have a first-year coach in Taggart. So not really sure what to expect with them this year, even though they do have a good team coming back, albeit not their QB1. And then obviously the Marshall game, that's now the homecoming game, will be a tough game just because, every year the last 3-4 years, it's always kind of been a nail-biter kind of coin flip game. This year it's at home. We obviously know last year Rohrwasser, even after getting iced 2-3 times, still kicked that big field goal to win the game. So as it stands, I pencil me in for a 9-2 regular season. That's very optimistic. That's without knowing kind of that quarterback play, how it's going to pan out, but being optimistic and how our staff will set them up for success. If I had to pencil in losses, I think Louisville and UAB could potentially be losses. Whenever we get to those previews, the realistic side of me might say, hey, give me a 3-point loss to UAB, and looking at Louisville, I'd give them 7 to 10 points, even as the first game of the season in a COVID-shortened preseason. So I expect a good year, contending for a conference championship, obviously playing in the bowl game, and kind of continuing to take that step forward and improving and getting back to being that fun to watch Western Kentucky team.
So if the wheels kind of come off a little bit, or we see some marked injuries. You know what I'm getting at. What do you think is kind of the basement for this team based on all the talent across the board on both sides of the ball? Actually, all three sides of the ball, counting special teams. What do you think is the basement? You can weather a few big injuries and still reach X amount of wins. What do you think that number is?
Yeah, I mean, just looking at it across the board, I mean, let's say Charlotte continues to progress and get better. FAU kind of stays where they've been. UAB, Marshall, Louisville. I could still see us winning 6 games and losing 5. Being 6-5. That's kind of my basement 6-5 expectation, and up to 9-2.
Well, I got to go back and talk in-conference record as well. I mean, 6-5, that's still bowl eligible. You got to think with so few teams playing right now, we don't know if some other conferences are going to try to start up late and sneak in there and steal some bowl slots or whatever. But 6-5 is going to get you a bowl game. You mentioned earlier 9-2 with your only potential loss penciling in at UAB, which is currently riding, I think it's a 17-game home win streak or something like that. It's a Conference USA record, I believe I saw. But that makes Western go 6-1 in conference if your only loss is to UAB, and that's a Western Division team. So you're actually liking Western Kentucky to run the table in the East, which is not going to be an easy feat considering, again, you will have to go to Florida Atlantic, and they've seemed to have the tops number the past couple of years, but that's in the past. You do have to go to Charlotte. Charlotte, I keep saying I believe is a dark horse contender to sneak in there and potentially represent the East if they continue on an upward trajectory. Marshall's always tough. We don't have to talk about last year as much as we have to talk about the 2018 game last time they were in Bowling Green, and that literally came down to the last play. If Ryan B doesn't get a strip sack, then it's absolutely possible that the Toppers go into the end zone with under a minute to go. I mean, we were right there. We were 15 yards away, 20 yards away, watching that pass, potentially sail towards us. And it was not out of the realm of possibility for that to happen. But look, there's a lot going on right now. I mean, Middle Tennessee they look rough. Marshall looked pretty damn good today with a 59-0 win over Eastern Kentucky. Nobody saw that coming. I don't care who you are. You did not see that coming. UAB will continue to probably be pretty tough, barring that they stay healthy. I mean, UT, Chattanooga, BYU, ultimately they don't matter in the race. I mean, of course you want to win them. FAU, we'll see. They've got a stable of talented running backs that their fans think go 4 deep, potentially 5 deep. I mean, they continually say that Brendan Knox wouldn't be one of the top 4 running backs on their roster, which is laughable. Southern Miss took a tough one, losing to South Alabama. I mean, at home, no less. So, Southern Miss is usually pretty tough in Hattiesburg, but they let that one get away from them. FIU, who knows you're going to get the Panthers at home. So, they like we said when Trace was doing his 2020 breakdown, they just can't seem to get over the hump. They're going to be bringing in or replacing James Morgan, who's an NFL quarterback now. And, they couldn't get over the hump last year. There's no reason to think they're going to get over the hump this year until they just show you that they can. And then Charlotte. So you get a fairly favorable schedule at home outside of Marshall. I mean, Marshall's really the toughest home game that you have on the slate right now. It's going on the road, and the gauntlet is really going to be 3 and 4 weeks with no bye week, talking about away at UAB, and then you get to come home for a breather on 10/24 with Chattanooga, and then you travel across country on Halloween to play BYU, and then down to Boca the following week. So that, to me, it's a 5-game gauntlet because you got Marshall the week before that. So it's really Marshall, UAB, a breather at Chattanooga, and then 2 more rough ones. Just looking at that 5-game span, that to me is the make or break meat and potatoes of the season as far as the Conference USA race goes. Where do you think ultimately the Tops are going to come out in that 5-game set? I know you don't like their chances at UAB. Honestly, I don't think they're that bad. I mean, UAB's good, but we're in a social distance type thing, so you don't have to worry about a formidable environment going down to Birmingham. So there's no reason to think that the Tops can't go in there and get a win. But outside of UAB, you look at Marshall, BYU, and FAU. Just like we talked about with Marshall and Trace, it was Western Kentucky, FAU, and Louisiana Tech. He thinks they only win one of those three. Are you honestly thinking that, UT Chattanooga aside, you thinking the Toppers are going to go 3-0 against Marshall, BYU, and FAU?
I think it'll be tough. Obviously, we just saw UAB play Central Arkansas, who beat Western last year. I think the final score was something like 45-35. UCA,
fairly close. Close.
UCA showed they're a good team, a good program. And I'm pretty sure they were playing on kind of short turnaround from the first game of the year even. So, that's a good team, even though it was a bad loss to open last year. But it may have also showed that, UAB is going to give up some yards. Maybe they're not as stout defensively as some of their rankings may show. So while I am, hesitant to pencil it in as a W. It's one of those games I hope I get to make the trip down and enjoy that game and that atmosphere. The kind of the last season in the old Gray Lady, I believe they call it. But I think we're going to be okay in that run. I don't really know what to expect from BYU. Haven't looked into them a lot. I know, the mascot challenge kind of parlayed into a football game, and hopefully more in the future. I know Todd is behind the scenes trying to get a basketball series and/or more football out of it if he can. Love him for it. Chattanooga, I expect to win. Marshall, we saw what Grant Wells did today, had a stellar debut performance. That'll make you a little bit nervous when you see, maybe they're a little more steady under center than what you expected with Isaiah Green. You kind of knew what to expect with him, and that was kind of a average ho-hum output. But that Marshall and that UAB back-to-back could be two coin flip games that could be one score, one possession for both of them. And then, BYU and UTC, I want to pencil in W's. So, I can see anywhere from splitting it 2-2 or, hopefully going 3-1. If you split those coin flips, that would give you 3 and, getting three wins, 1 loss out of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Chattanooga is going to be a dub without a doubt. So going 3-1 with the other 4 is, I think it favors Western to get Marshall on the front end of that at home before having to go to UAB. That could be a letdown game, especially if the Moonshine Throwdown is another instant classic that's going to come down to the end, and you have to pour all of your blood, sweat, tears, and emotion, and you're just drained from that game, and you're so up for it that, UAB sneaks up. They are not going to sneak up on anybody, but they just bite you.
Hey, question, are you still coming?
I don't know. I'd like to. I was checking flights the other day. It's going to come down to if I can get the vacation days put in. So
all right.
Right now we're trying.
You heard it, David Jost. He's trying. We're going to get him. We're going to get him to Bowling Green.
Right now, I'm trying. Yes. I think where it does not play into Western's favor is the fact that you got those 2 away games with no rest time in between. You go all the way across country and then have to come back and go straight down to Boca in a game that by that time FAU may have gotten it figured out. It might be pretty tough. And they've kind of had the number for a couple of years. So that gauntlet right there, that stretch in the middle of the schedule is definitely going to decide if Western is the East champ or potentially not. So if they can go 2-0 against Marshall and FAU, you like their chances. That's really what it boils down to. One thing I'll say about UAB, I remember last year you talking about them being I don't remember the term you used, but you were talking about how their schedule was so weak.
Overrated.
Yeah, you really didn't worry about them when they came in. Well, looking at it again this year, and I know some things have changed, but I doubt that it's changed to a positive note. UAB's schedule was ranked 129th out of 130 this year. So they were second weakest in the nation again. So they're just racking up wins against easier opponents before they get into, a fairly weak Conference USA. I mean, it's much like Western and Marshall. You win 1 or 2 games against the tougher teams, and you should play for a championship. But yeah, so they're the second weakest again. Wow. I mean, they know how to schedule them down there, I guess. So anyway, Steven likes the Toppers to go 9-2. Worst case scenario, you're looking at 6-5. Either way you slice it, you're talking about bowl eligibility, if and when or whatever bowl games look like. So I can't say that I disagree. I don't know that I would have gone 9 out of the gate, but they are pretty stacked all the way across the roster. And I mean, if the quarterback comes in and plays, I mean, just as good as Ty Story, then yeah, it's going to be a 9-win season. All right, Steven, let's get out of here. Let's have some final thoughts and close it out this week. And then we'll come back talking about a week 1 game against Louisville on Saturday. So what do you got? Final thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, we are officially under a week now into our first game, which is just crazy. Months ago, I didn't predict this would happen, and it still could change, obviously, between now and then. But, excited that we've got to see some live college football. And now it looks like it's going to be, played, in 7 days. It's crazy. We're going to go to Louisville and play a football game and then turn around and get a home game. So excited to be back into it. Obviously previewing these position groups and just seeing how strong we are. It just seems like across the board, just very few question marks. Kind of parlays directly into my prediction for 9 wins. I didn't want to sell short. I think last year I was 7-5 on our prediction, with a top out of 8-4. We exceeded that, and that was with a bad loss to UCA to start the season. Could have been a 10-win season. You hate to say coulda, woulda, shoulda, but if you win that ball game, you don't give up 21 points in the fourth quarter. You're a 10-win ball team in Helton's first year. So, I'm going to be glass half full. I'm going to be optimistic. I think this senior group that has been through a lot of adversity and had to live through Mike Sanford and has grown from that, I think they're going to come in, shock some people, and who knows? Maybe they get some eligibility and come back and do it again next year. Who knows? Man, it's going to be a special year. I'm ready for it.
I'll tell you what, you get the bulk of these guys to come back for another year. Wow. You could be talking NY6 stuff. I mean, that's not an exaggeration.
Mike Sanford was right.
Yeah, he just isn't here to bring it to fruition. But look, we're going to go back to that UCA game. You talk about a bad loss. I think really that was a galvanizing game. I mean, I think was the difference in the season. I don't know that the season plays out the same if they win that game, because it's just kind of like, all right, well, we're a decent team. We beat a team we should have beat. They got punched in the mouth at home, and they were like, all right, well, it's gut check time in week 1 or in week 2. And I really think that caused them to have to refocus and repurpose and get ready and play better football. And they did. And we saw that over the course of the season. I mean, I don't remember what was week 2, but I was thinking, like, was that FIU right out of the gate? And we thought
it might have been. Yeah. And they went and smacked them, knocked their quarterback out. And
yeah. I mean, and I couldn't remember if that was before or after Louisville or whatever, but
no, Louisville was game 4, I'm pretty sure.
Then they turned right around and they went down to Miami and they beat FIU, and what was a preseason pretty highly hyped FIU team, and they were pretty decent. They just, like I said, can't ever get over the hump, but to beat them on the road in an early game after suffering a terrible loss at home in week 1, embarrassing loss, it absolutely was the turning point in the season. You don't think that happens in week 1, but it absolutely did last year. And to go 9 wins plus 6, I mean, I say it over and over and over. It's because it's no small feat. It's pretty awesome. I think Western's poised to make some noise, and we say that a lot, but it's a 3-team race again in the East. To me, it's FAU and Western and Marshall, and everybody's got quarterback issues and questions, and Marshall got a little bit of theirs answered today. Grant Wells, the redshirt freshman, played extremely well. For those Topper fans that didn't watch that game or don't care, but just to know a little knowledge on the enemy, he set a all-time Marshall record for a quarterback in his debut. He passed for over 300 yards, threw 4 touchdown passes. I mean, he played pretty well. Marshall as a team, 59-0 over, the other Kentucky school, Eastern Kentucky. So Marshall looks like they might be pretty darn tough when they head to BGKY here in about 5 weeks. And yes, Stephen, I'm hoping to be able to come here, but it all boils down to if I can get the time off. It's not up to me. It's can I get the time off? So anyway, let's get out of here, and we'll come back shortly, and we actually get to preview a game. When they canceled the Olympics, you were steadfast that there was not going to be college football, and man, it looked like you were right. And to Conference USA's credit, as long as everybody stays safe, they didn't back down. They said we were going to play, and by golly, they're playing. So let's take us out of here, and we'll come back shortly.
All right. Go Tops.
Go Herds. We'll see you next week. It's the Moonshine Throwdown podcast. Later.